on the side. One of my patients says, "Well, you're not supposed to look at my medications. That's personal thing." Yeah,
Oh wow.
and I don't want you looking through my drawers with those medications. I'm just sharing
Yeah.
experience. So,
What did you do?
well, I have to explain that we have to, to have the list so that's make sure it's safe for him
Yeah.
to have all those things.
Yeah.
But you can encounter some patients who are really like particular on some privacy. They don't want their stuff
But
to
if
be
they're,
looked at.
you're there to help them, take care of them. I mean, then that means they don't understand why they're even on home health if they don't want
Yeah.
to share the medications with you. Um, and then a good conversation to have with patients is if you were to get evacuated, and let's say you went away or you were out of town, how would you get back? That's another, like having a plan in place how they get back. Do we need to help them with transportation? Because if if there is no way for them to leave the house, so let me give you an example. You have a patient, you know this patient needs help with transportation, and we can't get to him as an agency. What do you guys think is the next step to take in that scenario? Anybody? Because a survey might ask you, like, you can't get to this patient. How would you make sure that this patient is cared for? Because you know they're a level 1 patient. Somebody needs to be out there right away.
Call 911 or
There you go.
police.
Yeah, call the authorities. You let the authorities know that we have a patient at this address. They don't have a caregiver. Somebody needs to, go out there and help them. And since we talked about that scenario, I want to ask a real question to each and every one of you. So, you guys work with home health agencies, right? I think it's a good idea to have your own personal emergency plan yourself. So, how many of you have children? So, imagine it's a big earthquake. You have patients to be seen. Jed calls you, says, "Hey, you need to go see my patients," but you have kids to take care of. So you have, the professional responsibility, but you have to take care of your own children too. So a big disaster has happened. You gotta make sure that you gotta let the agency know during this real event, are you really gonna be available or not? And this is a problem where I've seen people have in other parts of the country where it's an emergency, they have 100 patients to visit, and really the nurses aren't showing up or the clinicians aren't showing up because they have kids, they have family. So I think one thing we have to figure out as an agency is if something were to happen, how many of us would really, volunteer and show up, and how many of us would have a problem. That's why it's good to start with your own personal emergency plan, is to say, where would I take my kids? Where would I stay? Where would I have a husband who can help or not? Um, just to throw that out there to keep that in the back of your mind, because we're fortunate not to have like a Katrina event, but if something like that were to happen, then we are responsible as professionals to take care of our patients. And we go about our days not thinking about it, but it can happen any moment. So is that something you guys ever thought about, or personal? Would you? No? You giving me that look? Because it's, it can happen. I have two
Yeah.
little kids, and
It's
if
an eye opener
I'm
now.
thinking, yeah, I'm
like,
thinking my kids
yeah.
are my priority. I love to take care of my patients, but I need to figure out what am I, but at the same time, I have my job as a, that I
And
need
your
to do.
family too.
So I need to, you got to think about it. How am I gonna,
Right.
even water, they recommend to have 3 days, a gallon a day for 3 days per person. So even if you're teaching your patients, the recommendation is a gallon a day per person for 3 days. So if there's one person, that's 3 gallons. Four people, that's 12 gallons of water you want to have, in the garage or wherever. Um, as far as the patient's home goes, that's the gist of it. The most important thing that CMS wants to see is how are the patients going to be taken care of? Where are they going to go? And they want to know exact address, phone numbers, and contact information. And if they don't have any contact information, we have to know, okay, this patient has nowhere to go. When something were to happen, we're responsible to help them. You know, it doesn't mean that you're gonna go put them in your car and take them. At least we coordinated some type of transportation. And last resort, we let the authorities know that, for example, down in, down San Diego, there's a 89-year-old lady who's alone who can't drive, but the roads might not be accessible to you. So it's super important when you're going into these homes to constantly have this conversation with them and talk to them, because during the survey they're gonna ask you these questions. And these are, from my experience doing all the surveys, these are the areas that they're mainly focusing on is the patient plan, and it has to be specific to them. So if the surveyor were to ask you, I'm always, even, PTAs, you guys are in there, right? Just ask them, like, has anything changed on your emergency plan? Has anything new? Just a yes or no, and you move on. It doesn't need to be constant.
Let's say a big disaster happened, and let's say we live close to the patient, and we can take them to a shelter. Is it okay to take them to a shelter?
It's okay, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's a liability.
Yeah.
While you were taking that patient, you got into a car accident.
Right.
Now you're liable for it. It's better to get arrange transportation,
family
or transportation.
Okay.
Then even as a clinician, you wouldn't want to put your clinicians or even yourself in that situation because everybody's just waiting for a reason to sue someone. So.
Right. Which is sad, right?
So you don't wanna do that.
You wanna be on that position or situation.
So let's kind of go over this form together. And even when you guys are in the home, if you're not a nurse, not the SOC, like doing the starter care, take a look at this and make sure that this is in the home packet. This is called the Patient's Individualized Emergency Plan.
Oh, can I just go back?
Yes, of course.
So here on the emergency plan, safe space in home. So it says here tornado, earthquake, and others.
So usually you would pick earthquake.
Earthquake, because this is the
Yeah.
like the California is the
Fire.
Fire too, right?
and fire.
We could do fire, but there is really not when it's a fire. You don't want to stay in the home. You want to get out. Just check and put run.
As usual. Run for your life. Okay.
All right. So it says the
Okay,
first thing.
So it needs to be answered then.
Yeah, we're gonna go. We're going from top to bottom.
Blank, those two questions.
Obviously, I'm not gonna go into date of birth, patient. This needs to be complete. But then we come to the emergency contact name.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be somebody outside of their house. It can't be their daughter that lives with them. And in rare circumstances, people don't have anyone, but that's very rare. I'm sure they have a friend, and it could be somebody that's living in Texas. But it's some just the contact person. You write their name, make sure what's their relationship, friend, a phone number. At least get one phone number. I know there's an alternate phone. I mean, if they have it, great. If not, then you want to get and try to get their address. I mean, this is where we're coming from, where they want to know where they're going.
Okay.
All of these three parts, this is what Medicare wants us to do.
Okay, I have a homeless patient, doesn't have any relatives here. Emergency contact person is his sister, and the address is in Ohio.
That's fine.
Ohio is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the best you could do.
Whatever
mean-
they have. Whatever they have.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
As long as it's not out of the country, right?
Yeah.
Armenian.
Their vacation.
So and then we come down to the bottom part where it's a safe place for them to evacuate to, this is where you don't, a safe place in the home, earthquake, you can instruct them under the table, a solid table. Safe place in the neighborhood, outside of a neighborhood. I mean, this is where you ask the patient, like, if something were to, let them think about it, instead of you sitting there and Googling it, have them think about it, where they would go. Like, give them make it real for them. Like, today, this house collapsed. Do you know where you're going?
There's a section for not applicable.
Those are, okay, that might be a patient that's at an assisted living. Then, the assisted living usually
They have a
has
plan.
a plan for themselves. Then
Okay.
it would be not, if the patient's living in the home, I know you really want to check that NA box because it's easy, but again, I think the way to get the patients to answer this is real life experiences. And I get it, you're gonna get the patients that don't want to answer. Like, I don't know where I'm gonna go. I don't care. What happens to me. But most patients.
So for ILF or ALF facilities, they have their own
Yeah.
meeting place in the
Mhm.
neighborhood. So it's okay just to.
You
put
can either
NA.
write NA and you could say per assisted living's EM plan or whatever, or you could just do the NA and that's fine. But a safe place in the neighborhood, it could be just their local church, that
Mhm.
they know that they could go to because if their house burns down or whatever. It could be multiple things. They need to have a safe place. And outside of the neighborhood, again, it could be a cousin.
Local park is okay.
Park. But they can't really get shelter at a park. We talked about that last time, but now, yeah.
Like
But-
a community center
Community centers and the
in a
church.
park. The park is like community center.
Yeah, rec center.
Correct. Yeah.
Maybe you can even within
But you
the
have to
community.
specify the name of that community center, right?
Yeah, it would. Like,
There's a
You don't need,
community
for these. I don't think you need to put the address. You don't need to go specific. It's just showing that okay, you had this conversation with your patient, where something were to happen. They know they're thinking about a safe place that they could go. So again, it's good to just quickly have a conversation with them. Like, if your house were to collapse, what would you do? And once you ask them, they start thinking. Okay, then they'll be like, well, I would go here. In the neighbor, in this area, whose house would you go? You could just put like friend's house or whatever. That just shows that you had that conversation with the patient and they know what they're gonna do. When it says fire safety and exits, so especially if a patient has oxygen, again, I know we talk about oxygen a lot, but that's one thing they focus on, making sure that their signs are up, making sure that their tanks are secure, making sure they have backups, and for fire safety, when you're there, as especially the nurses that are doing the SOCs, the home environment, you want to make sure that they have means of exits. Sometimes these old homes, they have those bars, and they have one door and it's all cluttered. If something were to happen, how are they gonna get out? And you don't need to go in there and remodel their house. It's just having that conversation and making sure you document that you educated them about the fire safety and exits and all that stuff with the patients. So the level 1, level 2, level 3 patients, obviously we figured that out upon SOC. And this is the area where, again, we come back to the evacuation. They can elect to remain at their home. But if their home, you gotta, again, have that conversation. If something were to happen to their home, where would they go to? And here's, either you could check to evacuate to a home member, a family member, friend, assistant. But again, you need to have the address, phone number, and the name of the person they're going to. Or they might say, I want to evacuate with assistance to a shelter, or a motel, or a special needs shelter. So this area, you need to check off. And you gotta make sure you have the conversation with them and not just check off a shelter, because during the visit, she might ask, did they talk to you about, emergency and where are you gonna go? And they'll just ask these questions to them. And you put shelter here, and the patient's like, I don't know where I'm going. Then it doesn't look well.
Do you have to check all of them or just
No.
one?
So
just one.
Just one, yeah.
One or two.
Oh, you mean from the motel shelter or
from the remaining in the home to evacuate with assistance.
No, if they want to remain, that's fine, but they need to also have a backup plan. So
we would check the box with evacuate with assistance and then choose from shelter, not emergency. So we still need to check those boxes.
I would evacuate to home. If the patient has family members that are willing to help them, that's the best one. Is just to get the name and of a family member or a friend.
And that's it.
Because the rest they need.
Evacuate
If
with
they're going to a
assistance.
shelter, usually they can't get there, so they need our assistance. But if it's actually a patient who really needs that, that's the time where we need to know that and relay that to the office. So the easiest one here is just to get a relative, a friend, a family that they can evacuate to if something were to happen to their home.
And that could be also like the emergency contact person.
Yeah, it could be the same person. As long as they're not living together, then it could be the same person. And on this bottom, you just want to make sure if they have any insulin, oxygen, vent, any of this information, you want to make sure that this is documented correctly. One, because, for example, you have the oxygen here at wood level, nasal cannula, mask. Is it a portable oxygen? Is it continuous? So you might not be able to get to your patient, and this is if EMS were to be there and they take their folder, then they know what the patient needs, and it's like you might know that you gotta call Bobby, their cousin, but you might not be the one who's going in there, and it's the authorities that go in there. So this form is gonna help them at least the basic stuff that they need to get them. Another important thing with this is make sure that the medication list is updated and always in their home folder. And keep an eye out, especially the nurses that are doing the visits, and physical therapists can do this too. Just keep an eye out that if they're running low on their medications, call the office, let them know to get the refill order going, because if they're down, they're taking Coumadin and they're on their last few pills, and something were to happen, then that could be a problem. So document whatever wound care they're on. If they're on any IV tube feeding, I don't think you have any much of those. So the most important thing would be whatever wound care order you have, put it on here. So if you have a wound care patient, whatever the order is, the treatment, make sure it's on here. And if there's any communication barriers, if they don't speak English or they sign language, whatever, you want to make sure that it's documented on here. Well, any questions on this form? I know it's been causing a lot of pain.
A lot.
Do you have any questions?